we want to start to work with our inquiry service. So I've opened up the file here in the editor, and we want to think about what it is before we start to make it work. What is a service? Now, the service is something that you do to include code that you're going to need in several places. It will provide you with services in several places. Typically, it will be used for connection to a database or a data source so that data can be retrieved and added. It could also give you structures and so forth. Anything that you want to use again and again is a good candidate for writing into a service. Now, our service is about inquiries. It's the inquiry service. So we want to make sure that whenever we use an inquiry, we work with the interface that we've created in the last video. So we're importing our inquiry from the interfaces folder and the inquiry object. What we can now do is we can start to add the methods that this inquiry service will give us. So the first thing we want to do is to give us a data set to work with. A data set is going to control how we manage and hold our inquiries, and we're going to hold them as an array because it makes it very easy for us to manipulate them that way. Remember that with an array you can iterate through objects and all sorts of things. You can go through them one at a time or treat them as a whole structure. So let's just look at this line of code. Public inquiries is of type inquiry, and the square brackets give it the array structure, and we're going to initialize it equals an empty array semicolon. So we've set up an inquiries array called inquiries, which is of type inquiry, and it's empty at the moment. What we can now do is we can now add other methods to our inquiry service that allow us to do some of the things that we say we do with data. Now, you'll remember we talk about the CRUD. We're going to not do the D of CRUD just yet. We're going to do that as kind of one of the last things we do. But we're certainly going to do the C, the R, and the U, standing for create, read, and update. So we'll add in template methods in here. We're not going to add code to them just at the moment, but we're going to add the signatures for these methods so that they can be implemented very easily when we do them. So the first method we're going to add is called load. And here's the signature for our load method. You can see that it's called load, once again Pascal case, because we're going to start with a small letter. And at the moment, we've just got a comment in there. So that's our first method, and that's our read method. So the next method we're going to have is called save. Now that obviously saves an inquiry. In a moment, we'll have all this working up, and that's part of our create system. Now, our create system is not the only way we can do things. This may be an update for when we need to change something that's within a particular inquiry. What we want to do now is we want to be able to get an inquiry which is a particular inquiry. We want to be able to reference it by the ID that we have for our inquiry interface template. Remember, it has an ID as a data member, which is going to be a number. So this method is going to allow us to get inquiries by establishing what ID we've got and supplying that as an argument to the method or a predicate to the method, and then returning that particular inquiry relating to the one that has that particular ID. And the last one that we're going to template up at the moment is called add inquiry. And this is the true create one. This is where we put a new inquiry into the storage, and it's called add inquiry, Pascal case again, the same as get inquiry. And this time we supply it with a predicate, which is a whole inquiry object. So we can just say, oh, save this for us, and it will do this into the structure using the inquiry interface that we've already created. So those are the methods that we're just setting up for the moment, and we'll pull these together in the code that we need to make them work as we move through the development. Before we move into the next video, what we want to do is to give our inquiries array some data to use. This is purely placeholder data. It's just dummy data that we're going to use for testing purposes. So in the constructor, what we'll do is we'll fire this whenever this object is used, whenever the inquiry service is created as an object. And we're going to supply it with one data item, just one for the minute. That's all we need. And you'll see, once again, when I paste in from Notepad++, I get this weird structure. I'm not going to complain about the spaces. So it's going to give us an object with which we can work. Let me just fix that. So I've taken away those formatting errors. They weren't structure, they were just formatting. So here we've got, when this object is created, this service, it will say that in our array of inquiries, we're going to add one inquiry, which is just square brackets for the array. And here's the first one. We could put more than one if we had sort of commas and curly braces for lots of different inquiries. In fact, we'll do that a bit later on. But here we've got one object that we can work with. So I'm going to leave it there. And what we'll do next is in our home page, we'll display this object. So that'll give us proof that we can take something from the service and use it in one of our pages for display.